Welcome back to another video, everyone. This is part 2 of my collection genus showcase. So the first half of the video, which I recorded just before, we did all of these spiders and these, and I just showed sort of some of the genus that I keep, but not all of the species, because that would be like a 3-4 hour video. So we'll get right into it, because there's still a few to go. The first one that we're going to show today, oh there we go, she actually touched my finger for a second, is the genus Stanwellia, and this is from the family, I think it's called Pycnothelidae or Pycnothelidae. I'll put it on the screen like I did with the others. So Stanwellias are, they're also sometimes known as metallic tube spiders. I want a bit like the golden trapdoors, and I think that's quite an inappropriate common name, as a lot of Stanwellia do not possess metallic colours like Arboreal do, and I've never found one that actually makes a tube, whereas there are quite a few known species of these that make a tube. So really these guys would be a far more fitting candidate for the name metallic tube spider. But regardless of that, this one seems to have buried herself for the moment. That's actually just a big liverwort a friend of mine gave me to grow in some of my enclosures. I just put it in with her for the moment. She's being a little bit shy, and I don't think we're going to get much footage out of her today just because she's kind of playing up, and I'm kind of doing this on the go. I'm not really doing it without any preparation yet. But yeah, these guys, they're sort of, most of them just have an open hole, just a regular hole in the ground, a little bit of webbing, not as much silk lining as what Arboreal would put on their burrows. A couple of them, I guess, must make some sort of tubes, and I have found some fairly nearby that are actually arboreal. So they live in fallen down rotting logs, and they've got this incredible blue and red alternating stripes on the front legs. So I've very rarely seen blue in any spiders that are not tarantulas, so it was pretty cool to find them and hopefully get some footage of them in the wild before long. That was Stanwellia, so let's move on. Now we are moving on to, I think this is the correct family, Anamidae, which is a group, probably my second favourite family of spiders. These are very cool. They're some of the largest spiders we have. They're also a type of so-called wishbone spider, a bit like this Rubifrons male, who is still threat posing us from last video. So the first genus we're looking at, I've got a couple of these now, is Namia. So this is Namia CF Darmsey, and it's a very, very beautiful spider. Now hopefully she'll sit still and won't try and run away on us too much. So Namia look extremely like another genus called Aname, which is also where I think the family name Anamidae comes from. In fact, it's actually probably pronounced Aname, but I promise it's spelt differently to how you think. So Namia are very, very gorgeous spiders, and the one immediate difference from Aname is the fact that they don't really have much of a metallic carapace. So you can see that if I zoom in, there's a few little gold reflective hairs, but they're nothing like Arboreal, whereas as soon as you put the torchlight anywhere near it, the whole carapace is just really rich yellow gold. So these guys normally just have a matte sort of solid colour carapace. The abdomens are sometimes metallic, so this one is a very pretty one because she's got those gorgeous red legs. If you look on the side of it, they have a gold sheen to it, so it's red, gold, sort of silver, and then when viewed from behind, they have spots on the abdomen, those little orange spinnerets. So they're quite colourful spiders. There you get a little bit of a better example of that gold coloration I love so much. And the other probably big behavioural difference between them and Aname is the web. So these guys make a lot more web, and in the wild they would have sort of an open hole with quite dense, thick white webbing around it. It actually looks quite similar to a tarantula's in just general consistency. It's sort of that really wispy, sticky web that gets all over your hands when you try and do maintenance in the enclosure. They're very hunger driven. She's actually recently dropped me an egg sac, which we're incubating right now. I'm hoping that it's fertile and that we'll get some spiderlings very soon. That'll be very cool. So yeah, they're quite cool spiders. She hasn't been in here, she hasn't been with me very long, so she won't be on, and she won't be on this in this temporary cup for very much longer either. Let's move on to the next wishbone spider. Up next we have a very uncommon genus, and it wouldn't surprise me if probably the majority of Australian keepers even have not heard of this genus before, because I only learned about it very recently. And this is the genus I think it's Teyloides. I'll put the spelling up on the screen as well. So I've got 2 different Teyloides, possibly I think 3, but 2 definite ones. And both times these were actually sold to me as an anime trapdoor or anime trapdoor. So you get an idea that automatically you get the idea that they're quite similar to anime and that it's very easy to mistake them for that. And yes, very fast as well, so I've got to be a little bit careful here. I don't want to try and disturb her too much. So these guys do share similarities between Aname and Stanwellia. So you still need to have quite a bit of knowledge of both genus, or at least some experience keeping them instead of observing them to be able to spot the immediate differences. So Stanwellia are normally a bit shorter and stockier than Aname. That's their first immediate key. So when you have a spider with very long legs and she's kind of tucked her arms over her chelicerae, but Aname have very, very prominent forward-facing chelicerae. Probably the only group of spiders I would know of that have more prominent would be, I think it's Atypidae. I think that's the family, which is purseweb spiders. So yeah, normally Aname have very long, elongated chelicerae in comparison to pretty much every other type. So first of all, we've seen that she looks like an Aname because she's got those really long, elongated legs. She's got the quite. You can sort of see how far forward those chelicerae come. They're at least 1 centimeter long. Aname also have most of them have vivid metallic coloration all over them, which very few Stanwellia have, apart from that one which we showcased very briefly. She's the first one I found that does. She could even be a Teyloides for all I know. Yeah, so immediately we've got a metallic spider with long chelicerae and long legs, which means it can only pretty much be Aname. However, there's 2 more characteristics we can sort of discern, and that is when viewed from behind, somewhat like Stanwellia, Teyloides have usually quite spotty abdomens. So it's a little bit tricky to see through the web and the poor camera quality, but you can see that she has little dots and spots hiding underneath all that gold coloration. And here now we can sort of see those chelicerae, see how they point forward quite much. In this case, it's not much more than Stanwellia, but it is definitely noticeable. And finally, probably the biggest difference between them and most Aname is, once again, the web. So like Namia, these guys make they will make nearly curtain web level silk all over their enclosures. I've got one other one which was also from a different spot but mislabeled as Aname, and that blanketed the entire enclosure in white thick silk like that. So this is just a temporary hauling one. I've only had this one maybe a week or 2. And so a very beautiful spider. It's got gorgeous metallic coloration. It's a decent size and it has really thick web. What's not to love about these guys? So I've only got 2 of them. I don't really know of many other people that have any from this genus. It's a quite uncommonly heard of one. So I'm very happy to be able to have at least 2 to share with everyone. And last for the wishbones, we have the genus I've been talking about this whole time, which is Aname, or Aname. Oh, of course, she's hiding. So I did mention that Aname don't normally make web. I've had this one for a long time, and the only reason she's got such thick web is because when you feed her, she does what's called a happy dance, which is where they spin in a circle and put web down, just to celebrate, I guess. So normally she would just have a little round hole, well, not so little because she's actually one of the biggest spiders I've got, and it would not have the thick web that these guys do. But this one is indeed an Aname trapdoor, and she is huge. So these guys are very common in South Australia. I think you can also find them in northwest Victoria. And probably my favourite part about them is they're just so keen, and they're very curious spiders. So they're the only trapdoor I can lure outside, and as you can see, they're very, very curious. They'll follow vibrations, even if it means you've got the torchlight on them. So this is my biggest Aname. So you can see that even when I lift this camera up, she's about the size of a small tarantula. She's probably bigger than some dwarf species of tarantulas overseas. Her leg span currently I believe the last time I measured her, so like this leg there to the back leg there, I think is about 83 millimeters. It's either 83 or 79. It's one of those. She's very big. I know she's definitely over 3 inches in leg span. The color is beautiful. She's got that really rich red, and this is actually her pre-molt color, so she's not even her most vibrant. When she molts, and you can see she's got a very fat abdomen, she eats a fair bit. When she molts, she will put on probably even more size again, because I know these guys can get up to 10 centimeters, and so we'll have a giant neon red, gold and black spider, and so they're very, very pretty genus. You can see why I like them so much, and I've got quite a few different colored ones. They're big, they've got a ferocious appetite, they'll often come out, you can tease them with this. So what's not to love about them? And if you want them to go back, well, even if I blow on her, she doesn't want to go back, but oftentimes they'll cooperate and they don't really mess around too much. So that is Aname, and we'll move on to the next one. And Australian spider collection video would not be complete without stuff that can actually kill you, unlike all the rest of everything we've shown so far, which is generally known to have very mild venom. The last group, so those are what lives on these 12 shelves here, or 12 containers I should say, are stuff that can kill people, but it sounds a lot more scary than it actually is. With enough precautions, you can manage these very safely, and they're probably nearly less risky than even a household dog in terms of how much danger they pose to. So first up, we have Hadronyche, or Hadronyche, however you want to say it. I've been saying it Hadronyche for years. Macquariensis. This is not so much a species highlight as it is a genus highlight, because this is just a showcase of what Hadronyche can do. So the most notable thing that pretty much separates these from any other spider, except maybe mouse spiders, is just they have these electric pattern trip lines coming out from a central silken hole. So that silken hole is here. They're very, very shy spiders. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about these overseas. I've heard people tell me that they will jump about 30 centimeters off the ground, latch onto you, that they'll chase you down. Whereas I go looking for these things, and they're a nightmare to catch because they're basically the shut-ins of the spider world. So these trip lines are how they detect food. So when something walks over it and makes a little vibration on it, the spider will come out. However, if you're walking past and you're going bang, 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 bang all over the web, your vibrations are so large and heavy, the spider thinks of it as a threat and will not come out. So I won't recommend doing what I just did, but I can say that it's based, unless you've got a spider that's about the size of your hand, which many of them aren't, unless you've been keeping them for a long time. They're very shy, reclusive spiders, but you will still get to see them come out to feed at night. So where's the actual burrow? Well, it has got 2 entrances. So the first one is under here, and the second one, which is actually connected to it, is under here. So the little sort of silken sock, I can see 1 foot there. When I actually first came in, she was at the entrance, but as soon as I tapped that, she shot back down. And I had a little bit of moss going up the top there. You can see I had a little bit, but she's actually pulled it down. Spiders are known for just destroying plants you put in their setup. This isn't a bit of an experiment clay mix I made, because clay, it holds moisture and grows moss way better, and it's just natural, whereas peat moss, I don't really like using it because it's not what you would naturally find them in. So this spider liked this very well. So all this loose soil here is what she's dug up. Like all this here is the compact stuff. You can't scrape that, whereas all this here, she's basically piled all that up there. She's dug a pretty big hole. It reaches sort of down the bottom somewhere. You can sort of see there's a little bit of a tunnel going there. There's a little bit of a root from, I think, a plant that was growing in there, but that's not really of concern. I think wild substrates are fine to use. I think they're a little bit, I think people tend to sort of think they'll introduce parasites. So there is a small risk, but generally it's fine. So that is the genus Hadronyche. Nearly all the webs look like this. Even the arboreal ones will just have this, but on the side of a tree. So you'll have those multiple entrances. I've seen up to 5, I think, on a formidabilis spider, and they have these jagged electrical trip lines. They do look a lot different to house spiders. As soon as you sort of put the two side by side, the differences are like night and day, and you can tell at the snap of a finger. Now, the other funnel web we have, this is the most infamous spider, I would say, nearly in the world. I think that's quite a logical and acceptable claim to make, is the Sydney funnel web. Now, immediately you're going to notice that these webs look entirely different. When you put them side by side, one is a very messy, jagged jumble of just random silk and tripwires, whereas the other is a quite elegant, sort of smooth web sheet. There's not really any messiness to it, and you can see that like the actual funnel is very well defined, whereas here it just sort of, it's a little dirty bit of silk with some plants on it that sort of sits flush. Whereas here we've got two entrances, one there and one there. And that is because there's actually a few different genuses of funnel webs. So this is Hadronyche, this one is Atrax. So what we have in here is a actually rather interesting red colour form, Atrax robustus, or the Sydney funnel web. Now, as far as I'm aware, females of this species are 6 times less toxic. So they have 6 times less atrachotoxins in their venom than the mature males do. So in here was a female, so I don't know, I don't think females have ever been responsible for any envenomations that resulted in eating antivenom. So I think if you're going to keep a funnel web, I would suggest that maybe a female Atrax robustus would be a good start, because they're not quite as potent as maybe the males, and Hadronyche, it's the same toxicity between both males and females. So I think it's probably a good one to start with. Would be cool to lure her out. I don't think she's going to come out. I can try, but once again, they are just such reclusive spiders where they can often tell if you're faking it and just trying to lure them out or mess with them. They're not the killing, fighting, just aggressive machines that people will tell you about. They're spiders to be respected, but not mindlessly feared. So to actually show you some funnel webs, we'll move on to the next one, because I do have one that is visible and ready to be shown. So what I have in front of me is actually a female of an undescribed species of funnel web that resides around the edges of Mount Tambourine, sort of on the edges of some of the national parks there, but they're also found elsewhere. Their range extends a bit further north, I believe, as well, which is, I think this one here actually came from one of those sort of more northern areas. So this one doesn't really have a proper species name. I've just been calling it species Tambourine 2, because I think there is another Hadronyche species Tambo or something. So this is a little female. She's not actually that big, and as you can see, she's a little bit sad. She's just curled up there. So I don't really like to try and stir up my spiders, but I think just with this one case we'll make an exception. I'll try and get her outside. Now, something that is very reassuring when keeping these, and nearly any primitive spider apart from the barychellas, is that they cannot climb smooth surfaces. Only tarantulas and those brush-footed trapdoors can actually do that. And now, here we go. Instantly you can see they have that characteristic pose where they can spread their chalisso very far, and you can see she's pulsing, so she's doing that as like an angry, aggressive thing, whereas if you left this out in the open, she'd be constantly kind of going like, let me zoom out, like, but it looks a bit strange because she's pulling all the way underneath her. So they're just a black spider. The difference between Hadronyche and Atrax, if you look from the side of the carapace, Atrax have a very flat, it's nearly an entirely flat carapace. So from the back of it, where it joins the abdomen to the chelicerae, there's nearly no rays at all. Whereas Hadronyche, on the other hand, such as this one, it's tricky to see because the edge of that container is putting that annoying shadow there. But they have a bit of a raise. So the back of the carapace is rather flat and low towards where the legs are. She's got a few they're not actually bad mites, they're just little hitchhiker ones that scavenge food. That's what those little white things are. So where the back of the carapace is, it's sort of really low, and then just behind the eyes, maybe about 5 mil back, there's a sharp raise. So at the front of the carapace is quite, the torchlight's now making it even worse to see, I won't even bother. So yeah, so the front of the carapace is quite raised, and that's how you tell the difference between Atrax and Hadronyche. Is just that raise of the carapace, and of course the webbing, which is very different. You got the jagged drip lines and that. So this is an arboreal one, actually. It lives in trees, and so there was a little bit of a funny story where a lot of people thought that these were northern tree funnelwebs, and those are the most sought after species in Australia. I don't have them. I thought I did. But yeah, it turns out that it's actually just these undescribed sort of Queensland tree funnelwebs instead. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think they're still very beautiful spiders. They're not quite as big, but they still live in a tree, which is cool. At the end of the day, that's what we like. We like a bit of variation at habitat. We don't want necessarily all of them to just be living on the ground. It's cool to have some arboreals. So what would a arboreal of this one look like? Well, we've got one right here. This is a juvenile, or more of a sling or spiderling. We abbreviate the word spiderling into sling. Let me just put the lid on this one back on. Also ignore the mislabeled lid, because that's again just an old thing I put this one in. So this is the arboreal tambourine tree funnelweb web. So once again, classical of Hadronyche, we have those jagged trip lines, so it extends sort of, it would be up a bit higher in the tree. This one particular one just wanted to, instead of using the hole I drilled through it, it just wanted to go around the side. So you have the central burrow, and then you have all these trip lines which go around it. They wrap all the way around the soil. And then really cool is that she actually made a demonstration of what the burrow would look like in the inside of the tree. We've got a second sort of entrance there, but it wraps around the side and goes down into where there's sort of a bit of a hollow down here I created for her. If the tree is really rotten, or if it's like a fallen stump, they can actually chew through it and make a bit of a tunnel, but most of the time they live in living trees, so they can't dig deep. They'll find like a knot hole or just any sort of reasonable sized crack in the wood that they can get between, and they'll make sort of a star-shaped web. So it will have that central point, and then it will have a few entrances radiating out. So she's got two. She's got one there, and then one immediately below it. It looks sort of like just one. Actually, it's three now that I look at it. She's got another one that's sort of just there. It's a little bit blurred by all the water droplets because I just watered the moss recently. And yeah, she'll be out every night. We can feed her. We'll be getting plenty of feeding clips from her in the upcoming videos. And then finally, another slightly bigger tree funnelweb. This is probably one of the more popular ones and commonly available ones in the hobby. This is Hadronyche cerberia, or the southern tree funnelweb. Now, these ones I think are really cool to own in any funnelweb collection because they're one of the few that look noticeably different unless you've got the Talagander locality. And they have a really light coloured abdomen. So they've got the black carapace and like the black legs and that, but the abdomen is very light grey with a sort of crucifix-shaped pattern. I believe that's actually the heart or circulatory system of the spider which shows through the abdomen, but it's a nice pattern to see on a normally black spider. So I've got a big girl, and this is a juvenile. It's sort of about the size of my thumbnail, a little bit bigger. It's definitely bigger than that one in there. So their favourite trees to burrow in are paper bark because the bark is so loose that they can burrow between it. I actually just drilled a hole all the way through. So it does actually have a little bit of a chamber there just behind where the sticker I tried to peel off was. So she goes up and down that tree, the tree branch that I've cut down. And here is a beautiful example of their multi-entranced web. So you've got one just there. This is where I would most commonly feed her because, as you can see, I've got a hole in the lid that I can drop pinhead crickets through. It lands straight on the web. But then down here we have another beautiful example of how they have multiple. So that's the second entrance down there, and it's sort of all the trip lines taper off down the thing. So that's Hadronyche, and there's one last genus I'd like to show for this. So lucky last for this video, let me just get a better hold of the camera, is mouse spiders. So I think these are one of the ones that are also very popular, overseas. A lot of people who don't really know much about Australian spiders, the first two things they ask me if I keep are normally funnelwebs and mouse spiders. They look very similar to funnelwebs. Actually, she's doing something really interesting right now because I've pulled her out. She's actually vibrating this entire patch of moss I'm on. I'm not sure how they do it. I've never read anywhere online that they can do this, but I've noticed quite a few times if you try and break into their burrows like in captivity, they vibrate the ground. I'm sure it's just a defensive mechanism, but I have no idea how they do it. There's actually been a time where I put a cricket in here, and it was trying to break through the web, I think, just to hide, and she was vibrating so loud that this container was rattling. Like, I can actually faintly hear it. It's like this little buzzing noise, and it feels like the whole thing's alive. So the best way to show how these are different to funnel webs, they're very slow and clumsy, which is why I'm okay to poke them, because they're very slow. It's actually pulsing quite a bit. I think that's just her trying to vibrate. If I flip her back the right way around, you can they're very shy little spiders. They have some of the biggest chelicerae and fangs to body ratio of any spider I know. Probably purse webs can probably beat them in that regard. The fangs don't really point forward as far as what Aname do, but they're still very large nonetheless. Let me just get a bit of a better hold. They're very slow and clumsy outside the burrows, which is why I'm actually okay to hold this. They're nowhere near as agile or fast as funnel webs. They're often, if they're in pre-molt, they'll trip upside down, they'll get stuck, like they're not the fast thing. And most notably, see how after all that stirring up, there's not a single drop of venom on their fangs. So these guys can or do have venom that is capable of very strong envenomations. They're called medically significant. However, mouse spiders, for whatever reason, nearly never use venom when they bite. They do what's called dry bites, and as you can see, there's no venom on the fangs, whereas if that was a funnel web stirring up, it would be dripping with venom. So they'll often do these big defensive bites where it'll be very painful. As you can see, this thing's a very small spider, but its fangs are about the same size as a medium-sized tarantula in proportion to its body, which is vibrating again. So they'll do these huge big bites with their chelicerae open incredibly wide. They'll take a massive big chomp, but they very rarely use venom. That's still not an excuse to pick these spiders up. I would never recommend handling them, even for an experienced keeper. It's just foolish. Anyone that you see doing it is just really showing off, and it's incredibly risky and irresponsible to do so. So with her legs that are pulsing, that's her doing that vibrating thing. I've never ever heard that of them doing that anywhere before, but both this is an eastern one I should have mentioned at the start. This is Miscelena ocatoria from Actinopodidae. I've got a couple of these. I've got one adult, I've got one juvenile, one tiny spiderling. It's about literally 3 millimeters long, and very luckily, and by pure chance, I've ended up with the biggest species in Australia, which is Miscelena ocatoria, the red-headed mouse spider. The females are still black. Look a little bit like this, just a bit different shaped, and they're about twice the size. So the only probably downside with these compared to other spiders is you never see them when you put them in. Like you'll see more of a trapdoor than you'll see of these guys. They're very, very slow eaters because of how clumsy they are. So when you put a cricket in, it takes them about half an hour to show interest. They have a very similar web to the Hadronyche with the central burrow with these tripwines. However, they bury it in soil, so it is perfectly camouflaged, which makes these very rare spiders in the hobby because collectors do have a tough time getting them. The Bradleys, like this one, are not so they're not so uncommon now. You do see them a little bit more regularly, but definitely the redheads. The only way I ended up with them was by pure chance. Some guy had a really heavy rain and it flooded a whopping 9 of them into his laundry, and he was very keen to get rid of them, and since I was advertising for some of them online on Gumtree, he saw the ad and he sold them to me, but I thought they were Easterns, but they were massive. So I had 2 when I moved to Victoria pretty recently. One of them didn't survive the trip. I'm not sure why, but the other one is massive, twice the size of this, and doing very well. And soon I'll have to rehouse that big one because she needs a bit better substrate. She's not too happy, so we'll get some close-ups and I'll show you the differences between this and them. So that is basically all the genus I have. I do have more. I didn't show any of the tarantulas because, I mean, you see those heaps. There's probably a million tarantula YouTubers around, and this is more focused on the trapdoors. There's plenty more. I think I'm just at over 200 permanent specimens in the collection now, and we've looked at maybe 20 or 30 or so of those 200 plus. And just because one in the genus I show behaves one way, that doesn't mean all the rest behave the same. So I hope you've enjoyed these little snippets of what I've got. Hopefully next time I'll start getting my channel intro and whatever all sorted out. I like to get some music so these videos aren't quite as boring to watch. I'll get macro lenses, I've got 2 on the way, and that way I'll be able to get better footage. So there's plenty I want to share with everyone about how we keep these spiders, the best ways of doing it, all different things I'd love to teach everyone about these incredibly misunderstood spiders. So I hope you enjoyed this video. These past 2 of this sort of miniature collection tour, so to speak, and look forward to the next one very soon. We'll be rehousing some things. See you then.